Well, first of all, you're probably wondering why I'm sitting. I was recently, a few months back, in a car accident, and I had the displeasure of breaking my tailbone. And that hasn't healed yet, so standing for any prolonged length is kind of problematic. So the event was kind enough to let me, oh, yeah, that is a difference, isn't it? Was kind enough to let me sit, so I hope this isn't a problem for anybody. And by sitting, I'm still at least 1.5 feet taller than Tony Orsini, so that can't be a problem, right?
I'm shrinking, Tom.
Tony, I love you, man. You know that. I want to thank everybody for coming out, and the two ladies that organized this. What a great job they've done. And Mayor Nystrom, oh my God, man, what a surprise! That was amazing. I did not expect that. And so thank you all for coming out and listening to this. I'll warn you ahead of time. I'm going to talk for about 20 to 30 minutes, a lot of it personal. So if this is a time that you want to go take a bathroom break or just go walk around and ignore what I want to say on a plane. What I wanted to talk about is the personal path that I took in writing A Swift and Deadly Maelstrom. We've talked enough about the history of the event, and I wasn't going to talk about that at all. Here's so I can put my pages up. And the original, and this is the foundation that went into writing it. And I can tell you that when I started thinking about pursuing the idea of writing this book, I had no idea that it was going to turn into what it has. All the memorials that we talked about, all the events that we talked about, it really has turned into something really amazing. I mean, not so much in terms of book sales or anything like that, but just in terms of things like this. People honoring it, people remembering it, and I think that's just really amazing. It really is a shock to me. When I first started this, I just wanted to really have some sort of chronicle piece of history for my kids. I mean, something from their father as an everlasting message to them, something that would continually connect me to them forever. And this was at a point in the very early 90s, and I'd still been relatively newly married. I had a wonderful little boy named Ryan, and a toddler little girl named Brooklyn, who's actually here tonight. And she's the beautiful girl there. Stand up. I told you I was going to have you stand up. This is my daughter, Brooklyn. When I first started envisioning telling this story, at the beginning, and I'm not kidding you, it was going to be nothing more than a few page handwritten document on a yellow legal pad, and just leave it at my house with all the details that I knew about this event, and they would uncover it, sort of after I was gone in a cabinet somewhere. Whoa, look what Dad wrote. And this was after I was long departed, and like I said, boy was I wrong. And this initial thinking really got a kick after my first son, Ryan, unfortunately, tragically passed away at 4 years old in 1994. And this was from a disastrously cancerous brain tumor, one that came completely out of the blue, and which was an experience that just set me back on my heels as a parent like nothing you could believe. Trust me, folks, there is no greater pain and suffering like watching your firstborn baby degenerate from a disease this awful, and then hearing that no matter what, the doctors do, he's going to pass on. And then being told that that you'll have to undergo this, you'll have to deal with this for at least a year, which was his diagnosed time frame. And as he slowly deteriorated, it was literally hell on earth, folks. I mean, it was not a good time. And so this was February of 1994 when he passed on, February 15th to be exact. And as you could guess, I then had to start looking at my life from a very, very different perspective. I still had a very beautiful 2-year-old daughter by this time, Brooklyn. I won't make you stand up again. And she now became my entire focal point at home. And it was ironic because at the time I was working in nuclear power. I'm a retired nuclear power plant supervisor, and I was in a job. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Roberta. Okay, it will help. I should have thought of it.
No charge.
Put it on my tab. It was, like I said, it was ironic because I was working at a nuclear power plant in Texas that I got in a job that I really, really became passionate with. So here I had this counterbalance of major grief at home, but at work I was doing exceptionally well and really enjoyed going to work. And so I had that escape, fortunately. So it was just a very weird time. So and of course with this, I really started thinking hard about my dad because now we had sort of similar losses, right? You know, my dad lost my mom, now I lost my son, and so this really became the first major trigger that got me out of the yellow legal pad stage and started me thinking about, okay, this flood story now becomes something other than just, you know, a yellow legal pad thing, and of course I wasn't nowhere near ready to write a book about it yet, right? And so, you know, life went on, and I kept the idea of how I was going to expand on this story very close. Soon, my son Evan was born in 1997, and of course, my son Evan is here tonight. And Evan, it's your turn to stand up. And of course, that was another emotional target for me. While at work, I was expanding even further. As the position that I had, and I won't go into the details of it, I'd gotten an opportunity to get a senior reactor operator certification. So my position to be offered that opportunity was a very big deal. And for me to then get the certification was a huge accomplishment, which I then was able to put into work. We did refueling outages at a nuclear power plant, and I won't go into any details about that. But that was the business that I was in. So things in Texas now were starting to pick up, right? You know, now I got two beautiful kids, and you know, the grieving for Ryan never ceases. I grieve for him to this day, but it's now starting to even out a little bit. Back in Connecticut, though, things weren't going so well. My grandmother, my beloved Nana, was unfortunately rapidly deteriorating around this time, like I said, this was 1997. This was the woman that took us in after the flood. She was 61 years old after the flood, and she took us in, my 3 brothers, and she had 7 children of her own. So this woman was amazing. One of the major premonition stories about the flood was March 2nd, 1963 was my 4th birthday. I just turned 4 when the flood happened. And we were having a little birthday party for me at the house, obviously. We lived on Lake Street, on the bottom floor under the Orsinis. And my mother was pulling the cake out of the oven. And of course, my Nana was there, and my mother put the cake on the top of the oven, and she suddenly stood up, and with this stark look on her face, turned and looked at Nana, who was her mother, and said, "If anything ever happens to me, I want you to take care of my boys." And of course, my Nana was like, "What are you talking about? What do you mean by that?" And, you know, "You're talking nonsense," kind of thing. And so that story has come down through her to all 3 of us, and we've passed it on to our kids. So it was just amazing. And it went down the road after we all recovered from the flood, and went to when we lived in low-income housing on the west side. There was a lot of debate after the flood on how we were going to be either kept together or broken up, and my Nana was like, "Absolutely not. Keeping these kids together." So anyway, ultimately, over time, she was forced to leave that house on, it was on Western Avenue, that we were all 3 brought up. You know, she had gotten older, and she had to be shuffled around until she ended up at the Hamilton Arms Living Assisted Facility, where her memory and Alzheimer's ultimately took her at the age of 97 years in 1999. This, of course, became another major emotional event for me, and another major stake in this book's origination. Excuse me one second. And again, this was 1999, but I still wasn't ready or even capable to write about it yet. You know, I was thinking about it a little bit. I knew I wasn't competent enough, nor did I know enough about writing or constructing a book to start on such a large project as this at this point. So what I will call the final ingredient that went into starting to write this book, the thing that, you know, caused me to put pen to paper, or I guess more accurately, keyboard to screen, were the final trials and tribulations that my dad went through. And so let's understand that this was a man that never recovered, nor would he ever be the same after this tragedy. I remember a story that he told me many years later. Excuse me. When we were discussing the flood. And this was when they were looking for my mom the next day. It really a surreal scene from what I've learned, with his brothers and my mom's brothers, all of them out there at the site where the car had been violently tossed over, just next to that garage roof that we saw in the video at Lamparell's car dealership. The roof was gone now; it had crashed down to the next level, and having been washed away by the flood. And so, all the Moody's and the Shays began at early morning search, and it was my Uncle Jerry, who I'm going to introduce here when I'm done, that ultimately found her. And my mom was only about 50 or 60 yards away from the car in a massive pile of debris. The daylight helped him see her house coat, and as he dug around a little bit, he saw her fingers, and ultimately her wedding ring. And then he looked up because he knew it was her, and didn't see anybody for a little bit. So he finally found a policeman to come down and help him. The policeman got more, and so they ultimately started digging her out. Like I said, a very surreal scene. So now they had to find my dad to tell him that they found her and to show him. And so they finally found him, brought him up there. He took one quick look, and all he did was walk away. He walked down. If you're familiar with the terrain there, it's multiple levels from where the car was to get down to the floor, down to Franklin Street, and then it turns up to McKinley Avenue. And there was an old, a lot of you might remember the old World War II armory that was on McKinley Avenue on the left side if you're walking up McKinley Avenue. Well, he made it that far, and then he just sat down on the sidewalk and put his head in his hands and tears and everything, and just said to himself over and over, "What am I going to do now?" It was just a bad period, obviously, and continued to be. So my dad, for those of you that knew him, he was always an uptight, sensitive, sort of temperamental person, and that was right from birth. And it was only by God's will that he had met the perfect wife for him. If ever a man needed someone exactly like my mother as his wife, it was my dad. I mean, she guided him emotionally, rationally, and intellectually. They were a couple that depended upon each other in a way that a young marriage was meant to be, in my opinion. So when she passed, I mean, all of this just disappeared from his character and temperament, and he just lost a major part of his spirit. So it was then that we all moved to low-income housing on the west side of town. Like I mentioned, Western Avenue. And from what I've learned, the housing administration over there basically gave my Nana an amazing deal, and that was dipped in empathy and sorrow. And she had to pay very low rent. My dad couldn't live there because of his income, even though it wasn't a great job, but his income would have set it too high for him to actually live there. But he had free access to come and go. He could stay there as long as he wanted. And for him, he took an old decrepit apartment downtown on Franklin Square where he lived for the rest of his life. He seemed to love that apartment, and I never understood why. And as you can imagine, this tragedy also destroyed him physically. He started drinking. Just beers at first, but of course that generated into harder alcohol over time. And he didn't really take good care of himself in terms of eating either. He was always fairly spare, for those of you that knew him, but soon he became a lot thinner. Nana would have dinner for us boys every night, but he stopped coming home to eat with us, and only rarely would we see him have a good meal. He got let go at the American Optical Company in 1994 for downsizing, and so here he was at 58 years old, and he was forced to take a retirement job at the Big Y grocery store out there by Walmart. And he worked there for another 12 years. At the beginning, he really liked it, but toward the end, I think because they characterized it as downsizing, and my brothers know a lot more about this than I do, but I think because his health was deteriorating, I think they got rid of him. And so by this point, he deteriorated pretty badly, both mentally and physically. So by this point, he deteriorated badly, both mentally and physically. It was no surprise to me to get a call from my brothers to hear that Dad had checked himself into the ER at Bacchus Hospital again. He had done this a number of times. He was in pain, something was wrong. I'd hear from my brothers, Dad's in the ER again. Okay, and he'd be out, in a couple days with advice from the doctors to do this or do that, and of course, he would try it, didn't like it, and ignore it, and this particular time, he checked in. He had been experiencing excruciating pain, mostly in his lower body, due to blood clots that were building up. And it was his own fault. And Sean's wife Pat will be the first one here to say so. They had recommended a gluten-free diet. Pat, you remember?
Yep.
And he tried it for a few days, and he ignored it, and he kept wondering why he was in such pain. And I hate to make fun of my dad, because he was really a great man when he was younger, but when he was older, he was just like a child. Anyway, so he leaves the hospital, he had checked in, I should say. He had checked in and gotten the advice on the gluten-free diet, and I'm sorry to be taking so long. Anyway, and my brothers had to give him injections for that, which they gave him injections a couple times, and then he told my brothers, "Don't bother anymore. I'm not doing it anymore." And this just went on until Friday, September 25th, 2009, when he went back into the ER again. And by this time, his body was shutting down, and now there were major signs of sepsis that were setting in. And September 27th, 2009, he was critical again, or he was critical. Ironically, I didn't even know anything that had gone wrong. My dad and I always had a 9:30 Sunday morning phone call, and I called him, and he didn't answer, which was, he was a creature of habit. So about 2 hours later, Sean called me to tell me that Dad was dying, and to get up here. I was in Texas at the time, and so here I am booking flights for 4 people. And I'm driving to the airport. Sean's wife, Pat, has the phone, and she's getting me to say goodbye to my dad over the phone. He couldn't talk, which meant I couldn't really talk either. And then a couple hours later, Jim's ex-wife calls me and says that he passed away. So all I could think about were the good times that Dad and I had as I get to the airport and fly to Connecticut. So that's how he passed on. And so after the funeral and the burial, when we got back to Texas, it really hit me that it was time to tell this story in a manner that anyone and everyone could access. And I remember when I decided to write this book, exactly, was outside on my driveway at my house in Texas. At that point in my life, I was really into reading and writing, much more so than I had been. I was writing some book reviews on Amazon and trying to put little literary flares on each one of them. And I was watching and following major authors. Of course, Wally Lamb was my first one. And listening to their nuanced interviews. David Foster Wallace, who's an author I'm sure nobody in here has heard of, maybe Wally has, became sort of my hero, while a much lesser known journalist named Dan Okren totally intrigued me. So these were guys that I was following and really getting into and getting sort of the writing bug. And so this was early 2010 when I started out. So I began to gather all the information that I had at my house. I did have a bunch of information on the flood. Books, family information. Tony Orsini was an amazing source of information. He helped me out when we were up, if you remember the memorial at the dam, when we came up to do that. Tony made a whole bunch of copies for me, and he gave me some people to contact, which was what I desperately needed. One of the most funny and ironic stories begins with a conversation over email that I had with my absolutely beautiful cousin named Nora Kasuba. Where is she? Stand up. I was discussing all this with her when I was writing this book, and she related to me that famous Norwich and national author Wally Lamb was also using the 1963 flood as a part of his upcoming book, new novel, that he was going to use the 1963 flood, and that I should meet him and share information and share our stories. And I said, well, man, I don't know. I don't know about that. And Nora said, no. I'm going to contact him, and you two guys are going to meet. I'm like, Nora, I don't know. And let me tell you about Nora. When Nora, where we ultimately came to reside that evening, I was also able to speak with Dennis Riley, who Wally talked about. And I'll repeat it, he was a Harper Times reporter at the time, and who also later announced my high school basketball games when I was a senior on WICH radio, when I was a senior at NFA. He got an early word that night about the dam break and evacuated his Broadway office. He raced up Boswell Avenue and made it to Centennial Square just as the flood flow came and destroyed that half of the Turner Stanton Mill. So he got eyewitness testimony on seeing the mill go down. And I never would have had any of this information if it wasn't for Wally's contacts. So amazing that we made that connection due to Nora. Nora, you want to stand up again?
No.
So it was all this newfound information that was really startling to me. I mean, here I was, man, I had a whole bunch now. And as I was developing my writing timeline, I started to realize that I was still missing, really quite a lot. And as I started writing to this timeline, I also saw the need to fill in these gaps. And that's when I realized that the Norwich Bulletin newspaper of that period, leading up to the rebuilding of the new dam, held a lot of this information. And this meant that I was going to have to come back up to review every day from the flood, which is March of 1963, through September 17th, 1965, when the new dam was declared complete. An event that my father actually refused to attend, ironically. He told me that late in his life. So here I come, back up to Norwich, right here to the Otis Library, in one of the research rooms, and I remember the first day I asked the desk attendant, was a young man, and I go, I want to review every day of the Norwich Bulletin from March 6, 1963 through September 17, 1965. Right now? I go, well, in reasonable chunks. Okay, I'll go get them. And but the staff here was absolutely wonderful, and I was also lucky, really lucky in terms of timing, because as I said, I worked in nuclear power. We had a process called benchmarking, which means sharing information between like nuclear plants. And so, fortunately, the Maelstrom plants in Waterford, units 2 and 3, were preparing for outages, and part of the benchmarking initiative is getting help from other plants to review their outage strategy. And Comanche Peak, where I worked, we were in a down period, and so I contacted Maelstrom and said, hey, I'm available, would you like, oh yeah, absolutely. So I contacted my bosses, and they knew about my millstone background. I started at millstone when I first went into the industry, and they said, yes, absolutely, go. So I got to come up here, do all the research, and my company paid for it. Of course, self-publishing, I won't go into the, self-publishing means you pay for your manuscript with a self-publishing company. They do all the work, and they publish your book, you pay for it, and then you're taking a gamble on your book, essentially, in sales to get your money back. Pretty simple. And this was actually another area where Wally really helped me. He suggested Ex Libris, which was a reputable self-publishing company, and I didn't know. I mean, I know. So I took him. I used his guidance, and you've seen this before. I think they came up with an outstanding book, and I've been totally happy with it ever since. And every time I contact them, they printed books for this occasion, and it was published in 2013. So I mean, we're talking 10 years, and they still jumped right on it. So I think they're an outstanding company. Okay, so it took from mid-November 2012 right up to the 50th anniversary in 2013 to finally get it published. And, you know, like anybody that's brand new at this game, you know, when the boxes showed up at my house, you know, I ripped them open, took a look at it. Whoa, here's a book with my name on it. And I never expected to ever see anything like that. So, ooh, it was pretty cool. And so we started advertising and distributing it right away. And I mean, make no bones about it, I wasn't under any preconception that it was going to be a great selling book or anything. But it did. It did okay and has done okay to now. I think my first big break was soon thereafter. I got to have a reading and a book signing at the Slater Museum at NFA, which was I really enjoyed that. Although I ran out of books, not a smart move. Prior to that, I got to go on WICH radio and speak with Stu Breyer, who everybody knows, and we had a call in, and so I got to talk about the flood with Stu and some call-in people. And then one of my great experiences was
My glasses was my coat.
later on, Wally again, when he was on his tour for We Are Water, was coming through to Dallas at Barnes and Nobles, and he contacted me and asked if I would come up and do a dual reading with him. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Of course I would. So we got to go up to Dallas and do a dual reading. And oh my God, that was such an honor. I really enjoyed that. And one of the major highlights of publishing this book, and it was in the video in 2014 when the Norwich Historical Society sponsored that huge event for my mom, erected the monument near the tree. And I'm so proud that this stone is still there because of this area of Norwich is, shall we say, not in a very pleasant area of town. This monument does, though, seem to get a lot of respect from the neighboring people, which I totally love and appreciate. And every time that I come back to Norwich, I always stop and take a picture and go to the tree and the site where our car crashed and just stand and remember. And then I always go to the memorial at Mohegan Park and do the same thing. Just look at it, and we always have lunch at Delia's. You gotta go to Delia's. Nothing like a Delia's grinder, especially if you're from Texas, right? I mean, you know, they don't make Delia's grinders in Texas.
Right, salami.
That's right. They're right salami. And so as I close, this has been an amazing adventure, again, for far exceeding my wildest dreams, while still continuing to this very day. And I'm so proud to have my kids here with me, and also a new addition to my family, my youngest son's new bride, Lauren. Stand up. Who we're introducing to the Moody side of the family now, and she's a total Texan, but we're accepting her anyway. And this is her first trip to New England, And we're showing her some Moody family history. So I just want to say welcome to my new and beautiful daughter-in-law. And so basically, as I close, that's how this book came to fruition and how it became written. And so I just want to thank everybody once again for listening to me. So if you went around and took a pee break or whatever, now you got to come back and listen to the rest of the program. So thanks very much. Thank you.